Welcome back, guys, to Wrong Turn Horror. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 Halloween horror stories that prove Halloween isn't safe. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon back house. The stories you're about to hear will make you think twice before stepping out on Halloween night again. Cue soft. Distorted children's laughter, distant trick-or-treating sounds, and faint wind chimes. Also, let us know from where you are watching and what time it is there. Let's begin. The fog rolled over Brindlewood that Halloween night like a slow, choking tide. 1999 had been an unusually cold October, the kind that made the leaves brittle and the air taste like rust. The street lamps hummed softly, halos of orange light barely cutting through the mist, and the neighborhood seemed caught between life and silence. Jeremy Coleman pulled his skeleton mask tighter and nudged his best friend, Cole Bennett, whose vampire cape dragged against the damp sidewalk. "Come on," Jeremy said through the rubber mouthpiece. "Just one more block." Cole hesitated. "This is the old part of town. My mum says the people down here don't celebrate anymore." "Exactly," Jeremy grinned. "Which means more candy for us." They crossed under the sagging archway that marked the beginning of East Brindle, where the houses leaned like tired men. Windows were boarded, lawns dead, and the mailboxes rusted shut. Their sneakers squelched against wet leaves, and somewhere behind them, a single trick-or-treat bell echoed soft, lonely, and out of rhythm. Jeremy tried to laugh it off, but the sound felt wrong, like a memory repeating itself. They reached a cul-de-sac where fog swallowed the road completely. That's when they saw it light, faint and greenish, bobbing between the trees beyond the fence line. A man stepped out of the mist. His clothes were old, maybe a long coat or robe. It was hard to tell, but what froze the boys was the pumpkin on his head. It wasn't plastic or carved. It looked heavy, wet, its jagged mouth dripping something darker than candle wax. The lantern in his hand burned with an unnatural glow, green flames swirling inside the glass like trapped smoke. He didn't speak. He only raised the lantern and tilted it toward the woods, as if inviting them to follow. Cole laughed nervously. "Nice costume, Mr." The man tilted his head, the pumpkin creaking against his neck. Jeremy felt something cold twist in his stomach, the kind of instinct you can't reason with. But curiosity, especially on Halloween, outweighed fear. The man turned and walked into the fog, the lantern light floating behind him. The boys exchanged a glance, and Jeremy whispered, "He's probably part of a haunted trail or something." They climbed the fence and followed. The path curved through the trees, and the deeper they went, the quieter it became. The usual Halloween noise, the distant laughter, the crunch of leaves. The world thinned to three things: the fog, the faint glow ahead, and the smell of damp earth that grew sharper, almost metallic. Jeremy kept glancing back, but the street lights were gone now, swallowed whole. The only light came from the lantern. Finally, the man stopped in a small clearing. He lifted the lantern high, revealing the ground beneath him, rows of crooked stones jutting from the dirt. A graveyard. Forgotten, old, and half collapsed. The fog hugged each grave like a blanket. On one branch above them hung Halloween costumes, dozens of them flapping gently in the wind. Witches, ghosts, superheroes. They looked faded, brittle, their fabric stiff as if soaked in something that had dried long ago. Candy bags dangled from some of the sleeves, still full. Jeremy's mouth went dry. "Cole," he whispered, "this isn't funny anymore." But Cole wasn't beside him. "Cole, Jeremy spun, lantern light catching empty fog. He called louder, his voice bouncing off the trees, muffled and weak. Then he heard the crunch of footsteps behind him. He turned, expecting his friend. The man stood inches away, up close. Jeremy saw that the pumpkin wasn't hollowed. Clean it was full of rot. A swarm of flies buzzed from its eyes, disappearing into the fog. Inside the lantern, the green flame flickered violently, reflecting faces, dozens of faces screaming silently in the glass. The man's voice came low, like a dying breath. "You shouldn't have followed me." Jeremy stumbled back, tripping over a gravestone. The lantern's light shifted, illuminating names carved into the markers. He squinted, his chest seized. One of the stones read, "Cole Bennett, 1999. He screamed. The lantern blew out darkness. When Jeremy opened his eyes, the graveyard was gone. He was standing in the middle of East Brindle Street again, breathing hard, candy bag still clutched in his hand. Everything looked normal. Streetlights glowed, jack-o'-lanterns smiled, laughter drifted through the mist. Maybe he'd blacked out, dreamed. He ran home, adrenaline pounding through him. His mum was waiting at the door, relief flooding her face. "Jeremy, thank God." "Where's Cole?" He blinked. He was right behind me. But Cole never came home. The next morning, the police combed the woods behind East Brindle. They found a torn piece of vampire cape snagged on a fence, but no footprints, no candy bag, no Cole. Jeremy tried to tell them about the man with the lantern, the graveyard, the costumes, but the words sounded insane. Eventually, everyone decided Cole had run off, maybe fallen into the river. The search ended a week later. Years passed. Jeremy grew older, but Halloween never felt the same. He avoided it, completely. No decorations, no porch lights, no candy. Still, every October 31st, as midnight neared, he felt the same pull toward the old part of town, like something calling him back. In 2009, curiosity won. He was 22, working night shifts, still haunted by that night. He drove to East Brindle under a full moon. The street looked abandoned now, half the houses condemned, trees growing through roofs. Fog, thicker than ever, hugged the ground. And then he saw it again, that green glow between the trees. His breath caught. After all those years, the same impossible light. He should have driven away. Instead, he followed. The dirt path was unchanged. His shoes sank into the same wet soil. The air smelled of metal and rain. In the clearing, he found the same graveyard, though older now, the stones eroded. But there were more of them, dozens more. The hanging costumes had multiplied too, gently swaying in the mist. Something crunched behind him. Jeremy turned slowly. Cole stood there. He looked exactly as he had in 1999, same costume, same plastic vampire fangs, same terrified eyes. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his voice cracked as he whispered, "You left me." Jeremy stumbled backward. "Cole, is that really you?" Cole smiled weakly. "He doesn't let us leave." The fog thickened. Shapes began to form behind Cole children, dozens of them, in faded costumes, faces grey and hollow. They surrounded Jeremy silently, their heads tilting in unison toward the lantern that floated above the graves. The pumpkin-headed man emerged once more, lantern blazing green. "Every Halloween," he rasped, "a light must lead the lost." Jeremy turned to run, but his feet sank into the ground, the soil gripping him like hands. The children moved closer, whispering his name in overlapping voices. "Jeremy, Jeremy, stay," he screamed, trying to pull free, but the fog filled his lungs. The lantern's light grew blinding and then everything went black. The next morning, police received a report of an abandoned car found on East Brindle Road. Inside was Jeremy's wallet and phone, still recording. The final video showed fog and distant laughter. Then, faintly, a green glow flickered across the lens before the feed cut out. When officers searched the woods, they found something new in the clearing. A fresh gravestone. The name carved crudely into it read Jeremy Coleman, -2009. That Halloween, trick-or-treaters in Brindlewood avoided the east side. But one family, new to town, decided to explore. Their young daughter returned home trembling, saying she'd seen a tall man with a glowing lantern who offered her candy from the graveyard. Her parents laughed, thinking she'd imagined it. Later that night, as they tucked her into bed, they noticed her candy bag sitting by the window, half buried in damp dirt. Outside, in the fog, a faint green light drifted down the street, and then vanished into the trees. The wind carried the faint chime of laughter through the quiet streets of Ashbrook Lane, a sound that seemed too alive for a place so hollow. It was Halloween night, 2005, and the moon hung like a pale, watchful eye behind a thin veil of fog. Most of the neighborhood had gone dark, porches unlit, blinds drawn, pumpkins left to rot where they sat. Only 3 teenagers still wandered door to door, their bags heavy with candy and their voices echoing down the narrow streets. Sarah, Luke, and Jenna had made a tradition out of trick-or-treating long past the age most kids quit. They called it the final haul, their annual challenge to see who could last the longest before the night went dead. But this year felt different. The streets were emptier, the air colder. Even the decorations that had once covered Ashbrook plastic skeletons, cobwebs, and grinning ghosts were gone. It was as if the neighborhood had forgotten Halloween altogether. They reached the end of the block, where the pavement gave way to cracked asphalt. Beyond that was the old Miller house. It stood at the far end of the cul-de-sac, behind a rusted gate, its windows blind with grime. No one had lived there for years. Not since the Millers vanished on Halloween night, 15 years ago. Jenna stopped walking. "Guys," she said, her voice low, "we're not seriously going there, right?" Luke grinned, brushing fake blood from his vampire fangs. "Come on, Jenna. You said no one gives out candy anymore. Maybe the ghosts will." Sarah, dressed as a witch, laughed. "You two are ridiculous, but fine." One quick look. The house was barely visible through the fog. Its roof sagged, and the porch looked like it would collapse under its own weight. But what caught their eyes was the pumpkin sitting on the steps, freshly carved, its face flickering with orange light. "That's new," Sarah whispered. Luke glanced around. "So someone's living here." Jenna shook her head. "No one's bought this place in decades. My brother said the cops sealed it after the Millers disappeared." Still, curiosity pushed them forward. The gate creaked open with a long, metallic groan. The yard was overgrown, weeds reaching past their knees. The air smelled of damp leaves and something faintly sweet like rotting fruit as they climbed the porch. The pumpkin's grin seemed to widen, its candles sputtering as though reacting to their presence. Sarah raised her hand to knock, but before she could touch the door, it swung open on its own. Inside was darkness. Not the kind that waits for your eyes to adjust, but the kind that seems alive, swallowing every sound. A single candle burned in the hallway, sitting on an old wooden table. Its flame flickered, and in that faint light, they saw faint footprints, small, dusty, leading upstairs. "Let's just go," Jenna whispered. "This isn't funny anymore." But Luke had already stepped inside. What's the worst that could happen? The door slammed shut behind them. Sarah jumped, turning the handle. It wouldn't budge. The house groaned as if exhaling after years of silence. She tried to calm herself, telling her racing heart it was just wind. Maybe gravity, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the air inside was wrong. It was heavy, thick with a quiet hum, like a heartbeat. Luke held up his flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, revealing old wallpaper curling off the walls. Family photos faded to ghostly shapes, and something else, a row of pumpkins lining the hallway floor, each with a small black candle inside. The flames burned not orange, but dark grey, smoking upward like tendrils. "What the hell?" Sarah whispered. "Who lights black candles?" Jenna grabbed her arm. "We're leaving now." But Luke was already moving toward the staircase. The small footprints led upward, and somewhere in the distance, a faint sound echoed, a giggle, high and soft, like a child hiding under a blanket. Luke's voice trembled. "Did you hear that?" The sound came again, laughter, then a whisper, "You're just in time." The three of them froze. Sarah aimed her flashlight up the stairs, the beam trembling. At the top step stood 3 children, 2 girls and a boy wearing old-fashioned Halloween costumes. Their faces were pale, their clothes dirty, as if they'd been buried and dug up again. "Trick or treat," one of them said. Luke swallowed hard. "Hey, you kids live here?" They didn't answer. Instead, one little girl raised her hand, pointing at the 3 teens. "You're late." Jenna stumbled back. "Okay, that's enough. We're out." But as she turned, the door at the bottom of the stairs was gone. Where it had been, there was only wall. Her breath came short, panic rising in her throat. "The door, it's gone. It's gone." Luke started toward the children. "What's happening here? Who are you?" The boy smiled. His teeth were grey. "We were the last ones to..." The candlelight around them dimmed, shadows crawling along the floor. The children began walking down the stairs in perfect unison, their heads tilting to the side as they spoke together in a flat, eerie chorus. "One stays. One plays. One stays. One plays." Sarah grabbed Luke's arm, pulling him back, but it was too late. The floorboards under his feet cracked open like a mouth. He screamed, reaching out as he fell into darkness. The sound of his voice faded quickly, replaced by the soft laughter of the children above. Jenna collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "What do you want from us?" The little girl with the cracked porcelain mask knelt beside her, her voice barely a whisper. "It's Halloween. We always need new friends." The walls began to pulse, swelling and shrinking like lungs. The black candles flared. Sarah felt the air tighten, her chest constricting. "Jenna, we have to go, now." They ran down the hallway, trying to find another exit. Every door they opened led to the same room, wooden floors, peeling wallpaper, 3 tiny chairs arranged in a circle, and a single pumpkin glowing in the center. Each time, the circle was closer, the air thicker. The house wasn't letting them go. Finally, they burst into what looked like the kitchen. Cobwebs draped from the ceiling. Dishes sat on the counter, still sat for dinner, covered in dust. On the table, 3 bowls of candy. Sarah's flashlight flickered over them, red and white striped candy canes, tiny chocolate bars, and teeth, dozens of small human teeth mixed among the sweets. Jenna gagged. Oh my God. Behind them, a door creaked open. The children entered the room, hands clasped, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. We can't let you leave yet, they whispered together. Not until we carve. Carve what? Sarah shouted. New faces. The lights went out. When Sarah opened her eyes, she was lying on cold wooden floorboards. The morning light spilled through a cracked window. The house was silent, empty. Her body ached. She turned her head and saw Jenna lying beside Hurstel, pale, her neck ringed with a deep red line. Sarah screamed and stumbled toward the door, which now stood open. She ran outside, barefoot, into the morning fog, gasping for air. The street was quiet again, as if nothing had happened. When she turned back, the Miller house looked normal, abandoned. No pumpkins. No children. She ran home and told her parents what happened, but no one believed her. The police found nothing inside the house. No black candles, no footprints, no sign anyone had been there. Jenna and Luke were listed as missing. The case went cold. A year later, on Halloween night, kids noticed something strange at the end of Ashbrook Lane. The Miller house had a light again, warm and orange, flickering behind the windows. And on the porch, 3 pumpkins sat in a perfect row. Each one was carved with a face. One looked like Luke, one looked like Jenna, and the third, smiling wider than the rest, looked exactly like Sarah. But Sarah hadn't died. Not really. Not in a way the world would understand. In the years that followed, she was seen wandering Ashbrook Lane on Halloween nights, barefoot and quiet, knocking on doors long after midnight, whispering through the cracks, trick or treat. Those who answered said she didn't look right, her eyes too dark, her smile too wide. And behind her, in the fog, 3 small children always stood, holding candy bags that dripped red dot by morning. Anyone who saw her was gone, vanished like the Millers before them now. Every year, Ashbrook Lane stays dark on Halloween. No one dares to light a pumpkin or open a door. But if you listen closely past the rustle of the trees and the whisper of the fog, you can still hear small footsteps on the pavement. You can still hear children laughing. And if you see a house with a single pumpkin glowing at the end of a dead street, don't knock, Dot, because the Millers and the ones who joined them are still waiting inside, giggling softly, their voices overlapping in a childish chant that never stops. One stays, one plays, one stays, one plays. There was something about the Redding farm that made people uneasy once the leaves began to fall. Maybe it was the way the fields seemed to stretch endlessly into the fog, or how the old barn leaned like it was listening to something underground. But every October, families from all over came to pick pumpkins there. The Reddings had run the place for generations, and their pumpkins were said to be the biggest, brightest, and sweetest smelling in the county. Tara Morris had been going there since she could walk. It was her family's tradition. Her mum loved the homemade cider, her dad loved the hay rides, and Tara loved the pumpkins. She was 16 now, too old for trick-or-treating, too young to stay home alone on Halloween, so her parents dragged her along for one more year. But that year, the patch felt different. The sky was grey, the air unnaturally still. Even the scarecrows seemed wrong to real, to human. Their heads drooped, their clothes stiff with moisture. The wooden signs that used to say, "Pick your perfect pumpkin," were faded, splintered, letters barely visible under streaks of rust-colored stains. Tara's mother squeezed her hand. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's make this quick before it rains." They wandered through rows of twisting vines. Most of the pumpkins were large, round, and ordinary, but toward the far edge of the field, Tara noticed something strange. A small cluster of pumpkins sat apart from the rest, half buried in dark, wet soil. Their color was wrong to pale, like flesh, and the stems weren't green. They were brown, knotted, shaped almost like fingers. Tara crouched to look closer. One of the pumpkins had a dent along the side that looked eerily like a cheekbone. Another had deep grooves that resembled a mouth. She reached out and brushed the dirt from its surface. The skin was cold and cool from the air, but cold like something that had been dead for a long time. "Mum," she called softly. "Look at this." But her mother was too far away, talking to her father near the tractor stand. The fog had thickened, muffling their voices. Tara turned back to the strange pumpkin, curiosity outweighing her unease. She tugged gently on the stem. It didn't move. She tried again, harder this time, and it came free with a wet pop that made her flinch. Something oozed from the baser dark red liquid that dripped onto her hand. She stared at it, thinking maybe she'd cut herself, but no. It was coming from the pumpkin. She wiped it on her jeans, trying to ignore the smell, iron, and rot. That night, back home, her parents joked about how quiet she was. "You've been weird since we left that farm," her dad said with a smile. "Still thinking about your pumpkin." She forced a laugh. "Yeah, I guess." It sat on her desk, pale and heavy, its skin smooth except for those strange, human-like ridges. Around midnight, Tara decided to carve it. She lit her favorite candle, pulled out the small knife, and began cutting around the top. But as she sliced into it, she noticed something strange. The texture inside wasn't like normal pumpkin flesh. It was fibrous, and it pulsed. She froze, watching a thin line of red seep along the cut. She swallowed hard. No way. But when she pressed the knife deeper, the pumpkin made a sound. A low, wet gasp like air escaping lungs. She dropped the knife and stumbled back, knocking over the candle. The flame flickered wildly, shadows stretching across the walls. For a second, the carved lines on the pumpkin skin seemed to shift, twisting into the faint outline of a human face. She blinked, and it was gone. Just smooth orange skin again. Her heart pounded. She grabbed the knife, tossed it on her nightstand, and blew out the candle. "It's just my imagination," she whispered. "It's fine." She went to bed trying to convince herself of that. But at 3:17 a.m., she woke up to a sound, soft, wet breathing. At first, she thought it was her dad snoring through the wall. But when she turned toward her desk, she saw the candlelight flickering, even though she'd blown it out. The pumpkin was glowing from inside. Red light seeped through the skin like blood beneath thin flesh. She sat up, frozen, staring as a low whisper came from it. "Tara." Her throat went dry. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. The whisper came again, clearer, this time slow, trembling, almost pleading. "Tara, you took my face." The top of the pumpkin split open. Inside, something wet moved. Two round shapes pushed outward, eyes, milky and human, rolling beneath the surface. Then a mouth, jagged and wrong, opened in the middle, exhaling a sweet, rotting smell. She screamed, but no sound came out. The pumpkin's light flared brighter, and for a moment she saw a reflection in the window behind it, her own face, stretched and distorted, flickering like it wasn't hers anymore. Then everything went black. Her parents found her room the next morning. The candle had burned itself to nothing. The pumpkin sat perfectly still on her desk, carved now into a detailed human face. Tara's. Her bed was empty, the sheets soaked through with something red and sticky. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, nothing. At first the police thought she'd run away, but her mother swore she'd heard footsteps in the hallway that night, soft, dragging footsteps that stopped right outside her door. A few days later, her father returned to the Redding farm to look for answers. He found the place abandoned. The front gate hung loose, the farmhouse empty. Inside the barn, rows of pumpkins still lined the walls, each one pale and heavy, their stems brown and gnarled. He recognized one of them immediately, had a small crack on the side that looked exactly like the scar on Tara's forehead from when she was 6. He dropped to his knees and whispered her name. For a moment, he thought he saw her reflection in the pumpkin's glossy surface. Then the smell hit him Mayan and Rotand. He stumbled back. As he turned to leave, he heard the faintest sound from behind him, breathing. He spun, flashlight trembling, and saw one of the scarecrows move, its head tilted toward him, straw creaking, the burlap sack stretched tight over a face. The same shape, the same nose, the same lips, terror, single quotes. He ran, tripping over the vines, not daring to look back. The next morning, the sheriff found his truck abandoned on the side of the road. The keys were still in the ignition, the door hanging open. Inside, a single pumpkin sat on the passenger seat. It was carved with his name. After that, the Redding farm closed for good. Locals said the land was cursed, that the soil itself had turned against anyone who tried to plant there. The vines grew faster every year, choking fences, creeping into the road. The scarecrows multiplied, their faces becoming more and more detailed. No one knew who made them, but each one looked painfully human, eyes sunken, lips stitched tight with vine dot. By 2010, people started noticing something new. Every October, around the time the fog rolled in, the pumpkins glowed faintly at night, not orange, but red. Some said it was just light, reflecting from the highway. Others swore they saw faces moving under the skin, pressing out as if trying to breathe, and sometimes, when the wind was just right, you could hear whispers coming from the field, names, always names. Last Halloween, a group of teenagers from the next town over decided to prove the legends wrong. They live-streamed their trip into the patch, laughing, daring each other to find the face pumpkin. The video ended abruptly, but not before showing something rows and rows of pale pumpkins stretching into the darkness, each one leaking something dark and wet. When police found the phone, it was lying on the soil, camera still running. The final frame showed the ground pulsing slightly, like it was breathing. And just before the footage cut off, a faint whisper drifted through the static. "Pick me. Now, no one goes near the Redding farm after sunset. The gate is chained, the house long collapsed, the field overgrown. But every Halloween, someone new disappears, ways near the edge of town, always with traces of mud under their shoes that smell faintly of iron. If you drive past late at night, You can still see the faint red glow from the fields. Some people say it's the pumpkins. Others say it's the faces trapped beneath the soil, calling out for the ones who took them. So, if you ever find yourself in an old pumpkin patch on Halloween, and you see one that looks too human, don't touch it. Don't carve it. And whatever you do, don't take it home. Because some pumpkins aren't grown. They're made, and when the harvest moon rises, they remember every hand that's ever cut into their flesh. They always said Halloween was supposed to be fun. Costumes, laughter, and the sound of candy wrappers crinkling under your hands. But for 12-year-old Eli Mercer, that sound would never be the same again. It would come to mean something else, something that followed him. Even years after the screams stopped, that Halloween started out perfectly normal. The air was cool and sharp, the streets glowing orange under porch lights and plastic pumpkins. The smell of smoke and wet leaves drifted from the woods beyond the Mercer neighborhood. Kids ran up and down the sidewalks, dressed as ghosts and superheroes, dragging pillowcases heavy with candy. Eli was dressed as a skeleton that year his mum had painted the bones by hand on his black hoodie. He went trick-or-treating with his best friend, Ryan, and Ryan's little sister, Lily. Their parents trusted them. It was a safe neighborhood, or at least it used to be. They'd been walking for hours, hitting every house on Sycamore Drive. By 9 o'clock, most of the porch lights had gone out. Ryan wanted to head home, but Eli had heard a rumor at school about a house at the very end of Old Creek Road. Nobody lived there, but every Halloween, someone left a single bowl of candy on the porch. No decorations, no lights, just the bowl. And the note always said the same thing. Take only one, or he'll come for you. Eli didn't believe in that kind of stuff. He laughed when Ryan hesitated. Come on, it's probably just some old guy messing around, he said. We'll go, take a picture, and leave. Easy, Ryan frowned. It's past 10, dude. My mum's gonna kill me. 5 minutes, Eli insisted. Don't be a chicken. So they went. Old Creek Road was darker than the rest of town. The streetlights stopped halfway down, and the pavement turned to cracked asphalt covered in damp leaves. The houses were spaced far apart, some boarded up, others sagging and empty. The wind carried the faint smell of something rotten. Maybe an animal in the woods. At the very end stood the house 2 stories tall, black shutters hanging loose, roof sagging under decades of rain. The porch was tilted, one step broken clean through. And there it was, a chipped ceramic bowl sitting right by the front door. A single note underneath a plastic skeleton hand. Eli knelt and brushed off the dirt. The note was old, the paper soft and grey around the edges. The words were handwritten in thick black marker. Take only one, or he'll come for you. He laughed, trying to hide the unease crawling under his skin. See, totally fake. Ryan looked round. I don't like this, Eli, dude. Relax, Eli said. Look, it's just candy. The bowl was full of small black and orange-wrapped sweets. They didn't look like any brand he recognized. No labels, no logos. Just twisted wrappers, shiny and clean, even though everything else around them was dusty. Eli picked one up. It was cold, colder than it should have been. He grinned at Ryan, unwrapped it, and popped it into his mouth. It tasted strange. Sweet at first, then bitter, like old fruit left in the sun. He spit it out onto the porch, wiping his tongue with his sleeve. Gross, he muttered. Probably expired. Let's just go, Ryan said. Please. Eli grabbed another piece and shoved it into his hoodie pocket. Fine, one for the road. They started walking back, their flashlights flickering in the dark. The woods on either side of the road felt closer now, the branches hanging low like fingers reaching down. The sound of their sneakers crunching leaves echoed too loudly. Then came the sound, a faint rustle, like candy wrappers. Somewhere behind them, Eli turned, flashlight cutting through the mist. Nothing, just the road stretching empty under the trees. You heard that right, Ryan whispered. Eli forced a laugh. Probably the wind, but the sound came again, closer this time. Crinkle, crinkle. Crinkle. It was steady, rhythmic, like someone walking behind them with pockets full of candy. They started walking faster. The sound followed. Eli, Ryan hissed. Someone's back there. Run, Eli said quietly. Now they sprinted. Their breath came out in white bursts, their candy bags swinging wildly. The rappers got louder, closer in, till it sounded like someone was right behind them, dragging their feet, breathing through their teeth. They didn't stop until they reached Ryan's house. They slammed the door shut, gasping, trying to laugh it off. Eli dumped his candy bag on the table, pretending everything was fine. See? Told you it was nothing. But when he reached into his hoodie pocket for the candy he'd taken from the bowl, it wasn't there. Just a sticky patch of cold residue, like syrup or blood. Ryan's mom came downstairs, frowning at the noise. She told them to quiet down, and soon the house went still again. The clock ticked toward midnight. That's when Eli heard it. Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. Coming from outside Ryan's window, he froze. Ryan was already asleep on the floor in his sleeping bag. Eli sat up slowly, every muscle tensed. Listening, it was faint but unmistakable, the soft, dragging footsteps on the pavement, the rustle of wrappers brushing together. He went to the window, heart pounding, and pulled the curtain just a little. The street was empty, but right in the middle of the road lay a small pile of black hand-orange candies. The wrappers fluttered slightly. Though there was no wind, he backed away, climbed into his sleeping bag, and pulled it over his head. The sound went on for hours, soft and patient, circling the house until it finally stopped just before dawn. When he woke up, the candies were gone. The next morning, Ryan's mum drove Eli home. He didn't tell her what happened. He didn't tell anyone. But that night, when he emptied his own candy bag, his stomach dropped. Right at the bottom was one of those black and orange candies. He hadn't put it there. He threw it away, trying to ignore the chill in his chest. But around 2 a.m., he woke up against the sound of crinkling. Coming from under his bed, he leaned over the edge, flashlight trembling in his hand. Something moved down there. Something that glistened. A hand, thin and grey, covered in candy wrappers stuck to its skin like scales. The fingers twitched, clutching at the floorboards. Eli stumbled back, screaming, but when his parents burst into the room, the sound stopped. Nothing there. Just candy wrappers scattered across the carpet. They told him it was a nightmare. He wanted to believe them. But then, the disappearances started. First it was a kid from his class, then 2 more from the neighborhood. Each one was last seen trick-or-treating near Old Creek Road. Each time, the police found small piles of candy outside their homes. The next morning, Eli couldn't sleep for weeks. He heard the wrappers every night, always a little closer, always just out of sight. Sometimes, When he looked out his window, he swore he saw a shape standing across the street, a tall, hunched figure wrapped in something shiny. Its head tilted unnaturally, as if listening. One night, he snapped. He decided to go back to the old house and end it. The bowl was still there, just like before, but this time it was empty, and the note had changed. The words were written in something that looked like blood. He's already taken his. Eli dropped the flashlight and ran. He didn't stop until he reached home, but when he opened his bedroom door, his heart turned to ice. His bed was covered in candy. Hundreds of black and orange wrappers, piled high, glistening under the moonlight. And in the middle of it, his own reflection stared back at him. His body pale still, mouth filled with candy. The wrappers rustled softly as the wind blew through the open window. Then a shape stepped out of the shadows behind him, a tall, hollow-eyed figure made entirely of candy wrappers and bones. Its grin was wide, wet, and red. Eli tried to scream, but his throat filled with something sticky and sweet. The world went dark, and the last thing he heard was the faint crinkle of wrappers wrapping round his face. The police said it was an accident. They found him in his room, suffocated under what they thought was a pile of candy. No one could explain where it came from, or why the candies had no brand. Ryan never spoke about that night again. Years later, on Halloween, Ryan was walking his daughter down the same street, when he saw it, the old house at the end of Old Creek Road. The porch was gone. The roof caved in, but the bowl was there. And the note, he didn't let his daughter get close. He told her it was dangerous, that some legends weren't meant to be tested. But when they got home that night and emptied her candy bucket, his blood ran cold. At the very bottom, shining under the light, was a single black and orange candy, the same kind, and just as he stared at it, frozen in disbelief, he heard it faint, distant, and unmistakable, crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. It was coming from outside the window now. Every Halloween, people in the county hear that sound, the soft whisper of candy wrappers brushing against glass, dragging across doorsteps. Some say it's the wind, others say it's Himda, Candyman, the one who comes for those who take more than one. So when you're out trick-or-treating this Halloween, and you find a bowl sitting all alone under the porch light with a note that says, "Take only one, listen to it, because if you don't, you might just hear it too, that quiet, sticky sound of candy wrappers, right outside your window, crinkle, crinkle, crinkle." There's an old legend in Pine Hollow, a small town surrounded by endless woods and fog-choked valleys. Every Halloween, locals say a house appears on the edge of town, one that isn't there any other night of the year. Some say it's a trick of the fog, an illusion caused by the moonlight. Others swear it's real, that if you go inside, you'll never come out the same. No one knew who built it or when. There were no records, no property deeds, nothing. But every year, on October 31st, around 10 p.m., people would claim to see the same thing, a 2-story Victorian house with flickering lanterns in the windows and carved pumpkins glowing blood red on the porch. And every year, someone would go missing. This Halloween, the someone was Mia Carter. Mia had just turned 17. She wasn't the type to believe in ghost stories, but she loved testing the boundaries of fear. Her friends, Kayla and Brent, had been talking about the haunted house for weeks. "You really believe it just appears out of nowhere?" Brent laughed as they walked down Hollow Creek Road. Come on, man, that's an urban legend. Kayla nudged him. Then why does someone go missing every Halloween? People get drunk, get lost in the woods, or run away, Brent said. Simple as that. Mia smiled, pulling her jacket tighter against the wind. Only one way to find out. They reached the edge of town around 9:30. The fog rolled in thick and low, wrapping around the trees like a blanket. The air smelled of damp earth and smoke from distant bonfires. The narrow road wound into the woods where the streetlights ended, and the darkness took over completely by 10 o'clock. They saw it. Through the mist, the faint outline of a house began to form. It wasn't there a minute ago, but now it stood tall and silent grey wood, sharp roof lines, porch light flickering weakly. Brent stopped walking. Holy, did that just appear? Kayla whispered. Yeah. The three stood frozen, hearts pounding, until Mia stepped forward. We came this far. Let's at least look. The grass around the house was wet, overgrown, and blackened in patches like it had been burned. Pumpkins lined the porch steps, each carved with different faces, twisted, open-mouthed, almost human. Their candles burned red, dripping wax like blood. The front door stood slightly open, creaking with every gust of wind. Brent swallowed. I don't like this. Then wait outside, Mia said. I'll just take a quick video for proof. Kayla grabbed her sleeve. Don't. But Mia was already stepping through the door. Inside, the air was thick and stale. The smell of rot hung heavy, and dust drifted in the flickering light from the chandelier above. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing dark stains underneath. The floorboards creaked under her shoes. Hello, she called softly. Her voice echoed too long. In the distance, she heard a faint tune music. A music box playing a slow, distorted version of Happy Halloween. It came from somewhere upstairs. Mia turned back toward the doorway. Her friends were gone. Kayla, Brent. She called, her voice trembling. Only silence. She stepped deeper into the hall. Portraits lined the walls, old and faded. At first, they looked like paintings of strangers, but when she squinted, her stomach dropped. She recognized one of them. It was Kayla, her exact face, frozen in oil paint, eyes wide and empty. The next portrait showed Brent, and the third was her, except in the painting, she wasn't alive. Her face was pale, lips blue, a red mark circling her throat. Mia stumbled backward, heart racing. What the hell? The music grew louder. The air grew colder. The house seemed to breathe, walls expanding and contracting like lungs. She could hear faint footsteps upstairs, moving slowly back and forth. Then came a whisper, Mia. She froze. Who's there? The voice was low and wet, like someone speaking through water. Welcome home. She turned toward the stairs. A shadow stood at the top tall, hunched, head tilted unnaturally to the side. It swayed slightly as if hanging from something. Then it began to descend. Each step it took made the floor moan. The smell of rot thickened until it was unbearable. The figure stepped into the light, a man, dressed in tattered 19th century clothes, eyes hollow, mouth sewn shut with black thread. A noose hung around his neck, the rope frayed and damp. Mia stumbled backward. Stay away from me. He raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the wall behind her. She turned, Dan screamed. The wallpaper was gone. In its place, hundreds of faces were pressed against the wall, as if trapped beneath it. Their mouths moved silently, eyes wide with terror. Hands stretched the surface, fingers clawing from inside. The man took another step. His stitched mouth twitched. Then, through the seams, came a single word, dragged, barely a whisper. Trade. Mia ran. She bolted through the hallway, down the stairs, into the kitchen, but every door led back to the same room. No matter which way she turned, she found herself standing in front of those portraits again, and each time the paintings had changed. Kayla's eyes bled. Brent's mouth hung open in a silent scream. In her own painting, her eyes were now closed. A single tear of blood running down her cheek. Something moved in the corner of her vision. A shadow sliding across the ceiling. She looked up and saw dozens of ropes dangling from above, swaying gently, each with a noose at the end. Mia. The voice was closer now, right beside her ear. She turned, but no one was there. The lights flickered. The walls seemed to pulse, the floor vibrating under her feet. The sound of creaking wood grew louder and louder, like the whole house was twisting, cracking from the inside out. She ran toward the front door. It was still open. She could see the fog outside. She sprinted, lungs burning, and dove through. The instant she hit the grass, everything went silent. She turned back. The house was gone, just fog. Empty field. Nothing else when the police found her the next morning. She was wandering the road barefoot, covered in dirt, whispering. They're still inside. They searched the area for days, but found no sign of the house. Brent and Kayla were never found. Mia spent the next year in therapy. She tried to convince herself it was some kind of hallucination, maybe a trick of the fog. But deep down, she knew. The house had taken them. She moved away, swearing she'd never go back to Pine Hollow. But the nightmares followed her dreams of flickering chandeliers, red pumpkins, and the whisper of a rope tightening in the dark. Then, exactly 1 year later, on Halloween night, her phone buzzed at 10 p.m. Message from an unknown number. It was a photo, Kayla and Brent, standing on a porch, smiling. Behind them, the house, and under the photo, a message. We're waiting for you. Mia dropped her phone. Her breath caught in her throat as her lights began to flicker. Slowly, her window fogged up from the outside, and words appeared in the condensation drawn by an invisible hand. Welcome home. She ran to the door, but the air around her shifted. The smell hit her first damp wood, rot, and pumpkin wax. She turned slowly toward the living room window. Outside, through the mist, stood the house. It shouldn't have been there. She lived 3 states away. But there it was exactly the same, its red lanterns glowing faintly through the fog. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. You left the door open. The doorknob rattled. Then came the sound floorboards creaking. Inside her apartment, Mia. The voice was soft, mournful, almost tender. She backed away slowly, eyes locked on the hallway. Something moved there, dragging its feet. A hand reached out from the shadow's grey skin. Black thread across the mouth. She screamed and ran for the door, yanking it open. For a split second, she saw the street outside. Then everything twisted. The air went cold, and she was standing in the house again. The chandelier swung overhead. The portraits stared down at her, all smiling now. The man with the noose stood behind her, whispering softly through torn stitches. Trade accepted. Her vision blurred. The walls began to close in, ropes dropping from the ceiling like vines. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. One of the ropes coiled around her neck, pulling tight. The last thing she saw before the world went black was her portrait freshly painted, on the wall beside the others. Her eyes open, frozen in horror. A week later, hikers near Pine Hollow reported seeing something strange. In a clearing deep in the woods, a house stood where none had been before. The windows glowed red, and inside, they swore they saw figures standing perfectly still, staring out. When authorities went to check, the clearing was empty, just dirt and fog. But on one of the nearby trees, someone had carved 3 names: Mia Carter, Kayla Dunn, Brent Fowler. Beneath the names were 2 words, etched deep into the bark: welcome home. Now, every Halloween, at exactly 10 p.m., the house returns. It appears in a new place each year, sometimes on a quiet street, sometimes deep in the forest, sometimes right in someone's backyard. And if you look too closely at the glowing windows, you'll see faces watching back, smiling, silent, waiting. So if you ever see a house where none should be, its porch lined with red pumpkins, its door slightly open, don't go inside. Don't take pictures. Don't even stop to look, because once the house sees you, you're already home. It was late Halloween night in the small, isolated town of Briar's End. The streets were nearly empty now, trick-or-treaters gone home, porch lights turned off, and jack-o'-lanterns flickering low with dying candlelight. But on the far edge of town stood a dilapidated farmhouse, the Hawthorne place. No one had lived there for decades. Locals said it was cursed. Every Halloween, someone claimed to see something staring from the upstairs window to faint. Hollow, glowing eyes watching the road below. Most dismissed it as ghost stories told by bored teenagers. But that year, 17-year-old Clara Jennings decided she needed proof. She had always loved Halloween. The eerie quiet, the chill in the air. Her father was the local sheriff, and her mother had passed away when she was a child. The Hawthorne farmhouse had been one of her mother's favorite places to paint before it fell into decay. Maybe that's why Clara couldn't resist the pull of it. Or maybe it was something darker calling her name. At 11:30 p.m. she met her friends Dylan and Marcy at the edge of the woods that led to the farmhouse. The full moon was shrouded by drifting clouds, and the forest crackled underfoot with brittle leaves. Dylan carried a flashlight, Marcy had her phone's camera rolling, and Clara, she carried a single pumpkin with a candle inside, her little offering to the night. Last look. Guys, Marcy said nervously as they reached the broken fence. Once we go in there, I'm not running if something jumps out. Relax, Dylan chuckled, but his voice cracked. It's just a house. The Hawthorne place loomed ahead. Black wood, windows boarded, except for one on the second floor. The door was crooked on its hinges, creaking with the faint wind. Somewhere inside, something scraped against the floorboards. They stepped inside, their flashlight cutting through decades of dust. Wallpaper hung in peeling sheets. A rusted tricycle lay overturned near the stairs. The air smelled like damp rot, and something faintly sweet, like rotting pumpkins. Okay, this is officially creepy, Marcy whispered. Why does it smell like pumpkins? Old Halloween decorations, Dylan suggested, but even he sounded unsure. They began exploring room by room. The living room was filled with broken furniture, an old piano, and an empty fireplace. But above it hung a single painting, a woman with long dark hair, her eyes hollow and black, as if the artist had scraped the paint out. Clara froze. "That's my mom's work," she whispered. The others turned to her, startled. "Wait, your mum painted that?" Marcy asked. Clara nodded slowly. "She used to come here when she was younger, before she met my dad." But as they stared, the shadows around the painting seemed to deepen. The hollow eyes looked wet, reflective, as if something was staring back. Dylan reached up and shone the light closer. The canvas rippled, like something beneath it was breathing. Then a soft sound. A whisper. "Clara." It was her name. Clear as day, she stumbled back, nearly dropping the pumpkin. Dylan's flashlight flickered and went out. Marcy's phone screen turned black, even though the battery had been full. The air grew cold, breath visible, the kind of cold that bites into your bones. "Who's there?" Clara shouted into the darkness. "Who said my name?" The whisper came again, but now it came from behind her. She spun around, and there they were. Two glowing eyes floating in the darkness, level with her own. Hollow, wide, empty. She screamed, and the pumpkin slipped from her hands, rolling across the floor. The candle inside guttered and died, plunging them into total darkness. Dylan grabbed her arm, trying to drag her toward the door, but the floorboards under them groaned, splintering. A cold hand brushed Clara's ankle, thin, bony fingers curling around her. They bolted for the stairs, not knowing why. Maybe instinct, maybe panic. But as they reached the landing, they realized something was terribly wrong. Every window they passed showed a different world outside, one with fog thicker than smoke, another with the faint outline of figures standing in rows in the yard below, motionless, watching. The hollow eyes followed them, appearing in mirrors, in the reflections of cracked glass picture frames. Marcy began sobbing. "I want to go home," she whispered. "Please, Clara, I want to go home." "We're almost out," Dylan said, forcing the door open at the end of the hallway. But instead of a bedroom, they found themselves back in the same living room where they'd started. The painting on the wall was gone. In its place was a mirror. In that mirror, they saw themselves, but wrong. Their reflections smiled when they didn't. Marcy's reflection lifted its hand and waved. Then, slowly, its eyes began to hollow out, collapsing into black pits. Dylan backed away, shaking. "What the hell is this?" The whisper came again. "Clara, come home." She turned. A woman was standing at the base of the stairs. Long, dark hair, the same soft features from the old paintings her mother used to paint. Clara breathed. The woman tilted her head, smiling faintly, but the smile stretched too far, pulling at the corners of her mouth until it tore her skin. Her eyes began to sink inward, leaving only two deep, empty sockets glowing faintly from within. "Come home, Clara," she whispered again. "It's so lonely here." Dylan grabbed Clara's wrist. "Run," he yelled, but as they spun toward the front door, every exit had disappeared. The windows were gone, the walls twisting into angles that didn't make sense. The wallpaper began to bleed. From behind them came the soft sound of laughter, hollow and echoing. Marcy screamed, clutching her chest. "It's inside me. It's inside." She fell to her knees, convulsing, as her eyes turned black, hollow. Dylan yanked Clara up the stairs again, desperate. But when they reached the top, there was no hallway anymore, just a single door. The door to the room with the window. The same one people always saw the glowing eyes in. They stepped inside. The room was small and cold. Moonlight poured through the cracked glass, illuminating dozens of pumpkins, all carved with different faces, all with candles burning inside. And in the center of the room sat an easel. On it, a fresh canvas, a half-finished painting. It was Clara's face. Dylan whispered, "That wasn't here before." The air shimmered, shadows moved. A voice whispered in Clara's ear, "You see now? You've always belonged here." Her vision blurred, the walls melting into darkness. She felt her body go numb, like she was sinking into the floor. Dylan screamed her name, but his voice sounded far away, muffled by distance. When he blinked, she was gone. The canvas was finished now, and her painted eyes were hollow. Dylan bolted from the room, down the stairs, and into the night. He didn't stop running until he reached the police station. When he told Sheriff Jennings what had happened, the man's face went pale. He rushed to the farmhouse with a team, but there was no sign of Clara or Marcy Dot. The only thing they found was that painting propped up against the wall. 3 figures now stood in it. A woman with hollow eyes, a girl beside her, and another with her head turned away. Every Halloween after that, people in Briar's End said that when you passed the old Hawthorne farmhouse, you could see the glow of candles flickering in the upstairs window. If you looked close enough, you'd see 3 faces staring back, and if you lingered too long, sometimes one of them would smile, because some paintings don't hang on walls. Some hang on your soul, waiting for you to return. And for Clara Jennings, she finally found her way home. It was the night before Halloween in the quiet countryside of Millbrook Hollow, where the wind carried the scent of damp earth and the soft rustle of cornfields whispered like ghosts. Every October, the town held its famous Pumpkin Harvest Festival, a family tradition that had lasted nearly a century. But this year, something was different. Something felt wrong. Emily Carver, a 16-year-old high school student, wasn't easily scared. She'd grown up surrounded by stories of haunted barns, witches in the woods, and scarecrows that moved when no one was looking. Her father owned Carver's pumpkin patch, the largest in the county, and this year he planned to make it the best one yet. The fields stretched for acres, hundreds of pumpkins glowing faintly under the harvest moon. But at the far end of the patch, near the tree line, there was one corner everyone avoided, a place where the soil always looked darker, the vines thicker, twisted like veins. Emily's father told her never to go there. He said that part of the land was cursed ground. But curiosity is stronger than fear, especially on Halloween. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Emily grabbed her flashlight and slipped out of the farmhouse. The cold night air bit at her skin as she made her way down the dirt path. Her boots crunched over dry leaves, and fog crept along the ground like a living thing. She stopped at the edge of the forbidden patch. The vines there looked black under the moonlight, and the pumpkins, they weren't orange like the others. They were pale, almost grey, and covered in faint carvings that looked like symbols. She crouched beside one and brushed the dirt off its surface. The symbol etched into it was a crude face, round eyes, and a jagged smile. But it wasn't carved by a knife. The grooves looked grown in, like veins under skin. A chill crawled down her back. Then, from somewhere among the vines, she heard it, a whisper, "Help me." Emily froze. She pointed her flashlight toward the sound. The beam cut through the fog, revealing a small figure sitting between the pumpkins. It was a boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, wearing tattered overalls. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his hair hung in damp clumps over his face. "Hey," she called softly. "Are you okay? What are you doing out here?" The boy didn't answer. He just stared down at a pumpkin in front of him. When Emily stepped closer, she realized he was drawing on it with his fingernail, carving the same twisted face she'd just seen. "Where are your parents?" she asked. The boy looked up. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark, like the light from inside a jack-o'-lantern. His voice was small and hollow. There in the ground, Emily stepped back, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" The boy tilted his head. "They feed the roots." And then she saw it. The vines around him weren't just wrapping the pumpkins. They were wrapping around his legs, tight, pulsing. Emily turned to run, but one of the vines lashed out and caught her ankle. She fell hard, the flashlight flying from her hand. It rolled away, landing face down in the dirt. She clawed at the ground, trying to pull free. But the vine was alive. It slithered up her leg, cold and wet. Wrapping around her waist, she screamed for help from the distance. The boy's voice came again, whispering through the dark. "You shouldn't have come here. He doesn't like visitors. Who's he?" she cried. The boy's head turned slowly toward the scarecrow that stood in the middle of the field, the one her father had built years ago to keep crows away. But now, under the moonlight, it looked different. Its head wasn't just a burlap sack, it was a pumpkin, carved with a jagged grin that flickered faintly from within. The scarecrow began to move. Its wooden arms creaked. Its head turned with a cracking sound, the carved grin widening as if it was stretching its mouth. It stepped down from its post, vines unraveling from its limbs like tendrils. The ground trembled with each step it took toward her. Emily struggled, pulling desperately at the vines around her legs. Her fingernails broke, her throat burned from screaming. The boy stood perfectly still as the scarecrow loomed over her, its pumpkin head tilted to the side, the candlelight inside its hollow face glowing brighter. The voice that came from it was deep, like the sound of roots breaking underground. Another harvest, another soul. The vines surged upward, wrapping around Emily's arms, chest, throat, pulling her down into the soil. Dirt filled her mouth as she screamed one last time. The scarecrow reached out, pressing its sharp, wooden fingers against her face. "Feed the roots," it whispered. Then everything went dark. When Emily's father woke the next morning, he found the back door open. Her boots were gone. He searched the fields, shouting her name until his voice cracked, but there was no sign of her. By noon, the sheriff's department arrived. They combed the pumpkin patch, turning over every vine, every mound of dirt. Nothing except for one thing. In the far corner, the cursed patch, they found a new pumpkin. It was larger than the others, and pale as bone. Someone had carved a face into it. Not jagged or crude, delicate. And the face was Emily's. The sheriff told her father it was probably some cruel prank, but he knew better. That patch had taken something before. Years ago, when he was a boy, his own brother had vanished in the same place. That night, he went out to the patch alone. The moon was full, and the pumpkins glowed faintly in the dark. He stood before the pale one with his daughter's face and whispered, "I'm sorry, Emmy." From somewhere deep beneath the soil, a voice whispered back, "It's okay, Daddy. I'm not alone." He stumbled backward, horrified because, as the moonlight shifted, He could see movement beneath the vines, small shapes pressing against the earth from below, like hands trying to reach the surface. He ran, leaving the patch behind, locking the gate. The next day, he burned that entire section of the field. The fire spread quickly, black smoke curling into the sky. For a while, he thought he'd destroyed it, but on Halloween night, when he looked out from his porch, he saw them. Hundreds of small, flickering lights glowing where the burned soil had been. The pumpkins had regrown, all of them pale, all of them carved with faces. And in the center stood the scarecrow, its pumpkin head flickering with a deep orange glow. If you visit Millbrook Hollow today, you'll find that part of the land fenced off, no trespassing signs everywhere. But locals say if you stand by the gate at midnight, you can still hear the laughter of a little boy among the vines. And if you listen closely enough, you'll hear the whisper of roots moving beneath the soil. Because every Halloween, the patch HUNGERS, and this year, it's waiting to grow again. It was supposed to be the biggest Halloween in the small town of Ash Creek for years. Mr. and Mrs. Dalton had hosted the most extravagant haunted house in the county, a sprawling, two-story attraction built on the edge of their property that drew families, teens, and thrill-seekers from miles around. They called it the Hollow House. Every October, people lined up outside its tall black gates, eager to pay $5 for a night of screams and scares. It wasn't just props or jump scares. The Daltons made it real. Every wall dripped with fake blood. The mannequins were disturbingly lifelike, and the air always carried the faint metallic smell of something that didn't quite seem artificial. But no one ever questioned it. After all, it was Halloween that year. 1998 was supposed to be their biggest event yet. Flyers went up around town saying, "One night only. The Hollow House will show you fear like never before." And they weren't lying. 17-year-old Ethan Clark and his best friends, Sam and Lena, decided to go on opening night. It was cold and misty, and the moon hung low behind the clouds like a dull orange lantern. They parked a few blocks away and walked through the fog until the mansion came into view. Towering, rotting wood, windows like eyes staring out from the dark. The line stretched around the block. Laughter, camera flashes, the faint sound of screams echoing from inside. When Ethan looked at the house, something inside him hesitated. He couldn't explain it. The way the building seemed to breathe slightly, like the wood expanded and contracted in rhythm with the crowd's noise. But Sam nudged him. "Come on, man. You scared already?" Ethan forced a grin, just soaking it in. When they reached the front, Mrs. Dalton stood by the gate, dressed in a black gown and wearing a porcelain mask shaped like a cracked doll face. "Welcome to the Hollow House," she said softly. "Once you enter, you must go all the way through. No turning back." Lena laughed nervously. Yeah, classic haunted house stuff." But Mrs. Dalton didn't smile. "Remember what I said." They stepped inside. The air changed immediately. It was cold, unnaturally cold. The smell of damp wood and rust filled their noses. Dim lanterns flickered on the walls as they walked through the first hallway. Every creak of the floorboards sounded amplified, as though the house was listening. The first room was what they expected: jump scares, mechanical ghouls, hanging skeletons. But halfway through, Sam froze. "Did you see that?" He whispered. "See what?" Lena asked. He pointed to one of the mannequins, a tall figure dressed as a butcher. standing behind a counter with fake limbs on display. Its eyes weren't glass. They were wet, the head turned just slightly, and the mouth twitched into a grin. Ethan swallowed hard. "It's an actor, right?" "Sure," Lena said, but her voice shook. They moved quickly to the next room. But something was changing. The deeper they went, the narrower the halls became. The walls seemed to pulse, soft and damp to the touch, as if covered in thin skin. "Gross," Lena muttered, wiping her hand. "What's this? Latex?" Then the light flickered, and Ethan noticed something. The wallpaper wasn't wallpaper at all. It was flesh. He reached out, horrified, and pressed his fingers against the wall. It flexed, moved beneath his touch, and a low groan vibrated through the hallway. Sam turned pale. "Dude, what kind of haunted house is this?" They hurried forward, pushing through another door. Inside was what looked like a dining room, a long table with plates, candles, and mannequins seated all around. Only, these mannequins had open mouths, like they'd been frozen mid-scream. The candles flickered, casting long shadows. Then, somewhere behind them, the door slammed shut. Lena rushed to it, pulling the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "It's locked." "Ethan, it's locked." The lights went out. For a moment, there was only silence, and then the sound of something dragging across the floor. Slow, heavy, wet. Ethan fumbled for his phone light. The beam cut through the dark and froze on a figure crawling out from under the table. A woman, pale as wax, her jaw unhinged and her eyes completely black. Her mouth was full of something, small pieces of cloth, maybe skin. She whispered, "Don't wake the house." Then she lunged. They screamed, bolting for another door. The wood gave way under Ethan's shoulder, and they stumbled into a staircase that spiraled downward. The walls here were covered in strange carvings, symbols that looked like veins branching outward. They ran, the sound of footsteps following them from above. Fast, many of them. Too many to count. At the bottom of the stairs was another door, old and iron-bound. Sam kicked it open, and they burst into a massive room. The basement. It was full of pumpkins. Hundreds of them, rotting, split open, and from each one grew long black vines that crawled up the walls and into the ceiling. The air smelled like decay. At the center of the room stood Mr. Dalton. His face was pale. His smile stretched unnaturally wide. "Welcome to the heart," he said softly. "The Hollow House is hungry tonight." "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan shouted. "The house lives," Mr. Dalton whispered, stepping closer. "It feeds on fear and flesh. It gives us life in return." He gestured to the vines, which began to twitch. One lashed out, wrapping around Lena's arm. She screamed as it pulled her backward, tightening, cutting into her skin. Blood splattered the floor. Ethan grabbed her other arm, trying to pull her free. But the vine jerked harder, dragging her toward one of the gaping pumpkins. "Help me," she screamed, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Please, Ethan." But before he could react, something grabbed his shoulder. Mrs. Dalton, her porcelain mask now cracked down the middle. Her eyes were gone, replaced by hollow, oozing pits. "You shouldn't have come here," she hissed. "Once you're inside, you belong to it." The vines came alive. They wrapped around Sam, pulling him to the ground. He kicked and screamed as they slithered over his body, forcing themselves into his mouth, down his throat. The sound that followed didn't sound human. Ethan turned to run, but the stairs were gone. The door was gone. The entire room had changed. The floor beneath him rippled, breathing, the vines pulsing like veins. He backed away, shaking, until he hit the wall and felt a heartbeat. The house was alive. Then came the voice, deep, rumbling, echoing through every wall. "Stay, feed me." The floor opened beneath him like a mouth, and he fell into darkness, into the sound of something whispering and chewing. The next morning, the police arrived at the Dalton property after multiple reports of missing people. The house looked abandoned. The gates were chained. Inside, they found nothing but dust and cobwebs. No props, no furniture, just an empty house. But the air was heavy, damp, and when one of the officers pressed his ear to the wall, he swore he could hear faint screams coming from inside it. The Daltons were never seen again. A year later, developers tried to tear down the Hollow House to make way for new housing. But every time they began demolition, something went wrong. Workers injured, equipment breaking, strange accidents. Finally, one night, the entire structure burned to the ground. The fire was so intense it lit up the entire valley. Yet, when it was over, there was no ash, no rubble, no trace that a house had ever stood there. Locals say that on Halloween night, if you walk down Hollow Creek Road, you can still see the outline of the house glowing faintly in the mist. Some claim they've heard voices, faint laughter, screaming, whispering. Others say they saw figures standing at the windows, motionless, waiting. And if you listen closely enough, you can hear the sound of wood, breathing, because some houses aren't built from brick and nails. Some are built from the people who never made it out. Halloween in the quiet suburb of Marigold Lane was always something out of a postcard. Neat lawns, glowing jack-o'-lanterns, and costumed kids running door to door under the streetlights. But that year, in 2007, something changed. Something wrong crept into the tradition. Something that started with 3 little trick-or-treaters who didn't belong. Lauren and Jake Miller, a young couple who had just moved into the neighborhood, were excited for their first Halloween in their new home. They'd spent hours decorating the porch, cobwebs, plastic skeletons, glowing pumpkins, and they had 3 full bowls of candy ready for the kids. By 8 p.m., the night was in full swing. Laughter echoed through the streets, and the air smelled like burning candles and caramel. But as the hours passed, the noise faded. The crowd thinned. One by one, the porch lights clicked off as families went inside. Lauren yawned, looking out the window. "Looks like it's winding down," she said. Jake nodded, flipping through channels. "Yeah, let's call it a night after the last few kids." But then 3 soft knocks echoed on the door. Lauren smiled, grabbing the candy bowl. Right on time. When she opened the door, 3 children stood on the porch. At first glance, they looked normal to boys and a girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. But something about them made Lauren hesitate. Their costumes were off. The smallest boy wore a burlap sack over his head with 2 holes cut out for eyes. The girl was dressed in a faded 1950s-style dress, her skin unnaturally pale, lips a soft blue. The oldest boy wore a cracked rubber devil mask that looked decades old. None of them spoke. Trick or treat," Lauren said with a nervous laugh. The kids didn't answer. They just held out their small, plastic pumpkin buckets. Lauren dropped candy into each one. "There you go, guys." Cute costumes. Still, silence. The tallest boy tilted his head slightly. "Can we come in?" Lauren blinked. "What?" Jake looked up from the couch. "Everything okay?" She forced a smile. "Yeah, just some late trick-or-treaters." Then, to the kids, she said, "Sorry, guys, no visitors inside tonight. But happy Halloween." The children didn't move. The one in the devil mask spoke again, his voice flat. "It's cold." Lauren stepped back slightly. "I'm sorry," but before she could finish, all three children turned their heads in perfect unison and looked past her toward Jake, sitting on the couch. Their eyes, visible through the masks, reflected the porch light, but not like normal eyes. They glowed faintly, almost metallic. Then the smallest boy whispered, "He's not supposed to be here." The words hit like ice. Jake stood up, frowning. "What did you say?" The girl's voice came next, soft, broken. "You took our house." Lauren's heart skipped. "What are you talking about?" The girl pointed to the living room wall, specifically to an old framed photograph that came with the house. It showed three children standing on the porch, smiling proudly, dressed for Halloween. The same costumes, the same faces. Lauren's breath caught in her throat. "Jake," she whispered. "That's them." Jake moved closer, shaking his head. "No, that's just a coincidence." But when he turned back to the door, the children were gone. The porch was empty. The wind rustled the fake cobwebs. The street was silent. Lauren shut the door quickly, locking it. "Okay, that was weird," she said, her hands trembling. "Probably just kids playing a prank." Jake forced a laugh, but his voice cracked. "Yeah, kids." They tried to shake it off, but as the night went on, strange things started happening. The TV flickered, the lights dimmed, and every time Lauren looked at the window, she swore she could see three small shapes standing by the mailbox, watching. By midnight, the house was cold. Their dog, Max, wouldn't stop growling at the front door. Then came another knock. Jake jumped. "Don't answer it," he said. Lauren hesitated. The knocking came again, harder this time. Then again, and again, until it became a steady pounding that shook the whole house. "Stop," Jake shouted, rushing to the door. He yanked it open, but the porch was empty. The street was dark now, every house around them pitch black. No cars, no sound. Just fog creeping low across the lawns. "Jake." Lauren whispered, "Where's everyone?" Then, faintly, from the yard, the sound of giggling. They turned toward it. Three small figures stood by the tree line, their outlines barely visible through the fog. One of them raised an arm and waved slowly. Jake grabbed a flashlight and stepped out. "Hey, this isn't funny anymore." The beam caught them briefly, but their faces were gone. Literally gone. Just smooth, pale skin where their eyes and mouths should have been. Lauren screamed. Jake froze. And then the flashlight flickered out. When the light came back, the children were gone. He turned back toward the house and saw the door slowly closing. "Lauren," he shouted, sprinting up the steps. But the door slammed shut before he reached it. He grabbed the handle, locked. He pounded on it. "Lauren, open the door." From inside came her muffled scream. "Jake, they're inside." He threw his shoulder against the door again and again until the lock gave. When he burst in, the living room was empty. The candy bowl lay shattered on the floor. The curtains swayed from an open window, and in the center of the room, Drawn in what looked like dirt or ash was a message: "We're home." Jake tore through the house, calling her name, checking every room, but Lauren was gone. Only her slippers remained by the back door. The next morning, police found Jake sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. He didn't speak for hours. When they finally got him to talk, he told them everything about the kids, the photos, the voices, the fog. The police didn't believe him. They said Lauren had probably run off, but that night, when Jake returned home alone, he found 3 small candy buckets sitting on the porch. Inside each one was a piece of candy and something else: a tooth, a piece of hair, a wedding ring, Lauren's wedding ring. He dropped them and ran into the house, only to find the lights flickering again. The walls whispered softly. He heard the laughter of children coming from the kitchen. "Trick or treat," a voice whispered behind him. He turned and saw them standing in the hallway, their masks back on, hands outstretched. Jake screamed, stumbling backward. The lights exploded. The neighbors called the police after hearing the noise, but by the time they arrived, the house was empty again. Jake was gone. All they found was a single photograph sitting on the mantel. It showed 3 children standing on the porch, and now, behind them, a man and a woman smiling faintly. Lauren and Jake, every Halloween since. People on Marigold Lane have reported strange knocks on their doors long after midnight when they open them. Sometimes they find no one there, just 3 small pumpkin buckets waiting on the step. And if you ever see 3 silent trick-or-treaters standing at the edge of your yard, don't give them candy. Don't speak to them, because they're not looking for treats. They're looking for their home. There's a legend in the small town of Maple Hollow, a place tucked between rolling hills and endless forest. Locals whisper that once every year, and only on Halloween nights, a house appears on Raven's End Road, a house that shouldn't exist. People say it just shows up. No one builds it. No one lives there. But when the clock strikes midnight on Halloween, it stands tall among the dead trees, a 2-story Victorian home with flickering orange lights in its windows and carved pumpkins glowing on the porch. By sunrise, it's gone, leaving only empty dirt and dead leaves where it stood. For years, it was just a story, until Ethan Ward, a true crime podcaster, obsessed with the paranormal, decided to prove it was real. It was Halloween night, 2022, when Ethan drove down Raven's End Road with his equipment packed neatly in the back seat, cameras, voice recorders, and a drone. The town's main street was alive with costumes and laughter, but the deeper he drove into the woods, the quieter it became. No kids, no decorations, just trees twisting like black bones in the fog. At 11:45 p.m., his headlights caught something, a shape in the mist. A gate, old, rusted, and half buried in vines. His heart pounded. This was it. He parked the car and grabbed his flashlight. The woods were thick, silent, suffocating. And then, through the fog, he saw a house standing in the clearing. It was exactly as the legend described: peeling white paint, crooked shutters, a porch light flickering weakly in the darkness. Ethan smiled into his camera. This is it. October 31st, 11:59 p.m. I've found the house on Raven's End Road. He climbed the steps, each one creaking beneath his boots. The air smelled like wet earth and old wood. When he reached the door, he noticed a small jack-o'-lantern sitting beside it. Its grin jagged and wrong, like someone had carved it with trembling hands. Inside its mouth was a lit candle, but the flame burned blue. Ethan knocked. The sound echoed strangely, as if the air around him swallowed it whole. No answer. He turned the handle, and the door creaked open. The inside smelled of dust and rot. His flashlight beams swept across the hallway, peeling wallpaper, framed photos on the wall, an old staircase winding upward. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, yet the air felt freshly disturbed. He whispered to his recorder, "It's empty, but someone's been here." The floorboards groaned as he walked through. His camera picked up faint movement, shadows flickering at the edge of the light. He paused at one of the framed photographs. It showed a family, a man, a woman, and 2 children. Their faces were faded, but their eyes seemed too dark, almost hollow. He continued into the living room, where a fire burned weakly in the fireplace. That stopped him cold. The fire was real, warm, crackling, alive. Someone had to have started it. He swallowed hard. "Hello." His voice trembled slightly. "Is anyone here?" From upstairs came a sound, a slow, deliberate thump. Then another dot footsteps. He turned the camera toward the staircase, his hand shaking slightly. "Is someone up there?" No response, just the soft creak of weight shifting on old wood. He started climbing, one step at a time, the sound recorder picking up every breath. The air grew colder the higher he went. His flashlight flickered. For a split second, he thought he saw something move at the top of the stairs, a figure in white. But when he reached the landing, there was nothing. 3 doors lined the hallway. The first opened to a child's room. Toys scattered on the floor, an old crib, and a single balloon floating near the ceiling, black, with "Happy Halloween" faintly written on it. He whispered, "What the hell?" and reached out to touch it. The balloon suddenly burst, loud, sharp, like a gunshot. He jumped back, breathing fast. Then he noticed the wall behind the crib, covered in scratch marks, letters carved deep into the plaster. He leaned in to read them. "Get out." He backed away, slamming the door shut. The second room was a bathroom empty, except for the mirror. In it, he saw his reflection, but behind him, in the reflection only, stood the family from the photographs, the man, the woman, the 2 children, all staring directly at him. He spun around, nothing there. When he looked back at the mirror, the reflection was gone, too. He whispered shakily, "Okay, this is real. I have to get out." But as he turned toward the stairs, he froze. The air was heavy, humming, and the house suddenly breathed. The walls expanded and contracted like lungs. A deep groan echoed through the beams, and then laughter, childlike, distant, echoing through the halls. He ran toward the stairs, but when he looked down, the ground floor was gone. In its place was darkness, a black void swallowing everything below. "Please," he whispered, trembling. "Please, let me out." The laughter stopped. Then, from behind him, a soft voice, a child's voice, whispered, "You came back." He turned slowly. At the end of the hall stood the 2 children from the photo. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths black. They were holding hands. "You shouldn't have come back," the girl said. I've never been here," he murmured. But then the boy smiled, revealing small, sharp teeth. "Yes, you have. Everyone comes back. On Halloween, the walls began to shake. The pictures fell, glass shattering across the floor. The house moaned, and the temperature dropped until Ethan could see his breath. He stumbled backward into the third room and slammed the door. It was a nursery, empty except for a rocking chair moving slowly back and forth. A lullaby played softly from nowhere, echoing through the walls. He turned to leave, but the door was gone. Just smooth wallpaper where it had been. No, no, no. He hit the wall, searching for the handle. The lullaby grew louder, twisting, distorting, and then he saw it, carved into the wood of the rocking chair. We wait for the living. The chair stopped moving behind him. A hand touched his shoulder. He screamed, and everything went black. The next morning, at sunrise, a couple driving through Raven's End Road called the police. They claimed they'd seen a house standing in the woods that hadn't been there the day before. But when officers arrived, there was nothing. Just trees and an old patch of dead grass. All they found was Ethan's car parked on the roadside. Engine still warm, doors unlocked. Inside was his phone, still recording. The last thing captured was his voice whispering, "Please, someone help me," followed by faint laughter and then silence. The audio ends exactly at midnight to this day. No one knows what happened to Ethan Ward. Some say he vanished into the woods. Others believe he's still in that house, trapped, waiting for the next Halloween. When the house returns again, locals claim that if you drive down Raven's End Road on Halloween night and look closely through the trees, you'll see a flicker of light. Maybe a porch lantern, maybe a camera flash, but whatever you do, don't stop, because if you see the house, it means it's already seen you, and when midnight comes, it might not let you leave.